Hey guys, so welcome back to today's video. Today we're going to be talking all things work capacity. This was a video requested by Fazal Mohammed, so we're going to be taking a deep dive into it. So for me, work capacity is one of the main priorities of my program. I think one of the things that in our training, as we sort of pan out, which is what I sort of say a lot of panning out and look at our training as a long-term process, we should be always looking to raise our general work capacity and our general physical preparedness. Because the reality is that people with higher work capacities can perform and recover from more work and also have less likelihood of being injured in the process. And that's ultimately the underlying theme of all things training, right? We need to be able to perform more work so that we can get stronger, get fitter, get faster, but we need to be able to do so at a way that doesn't expose us to higher risk of injuries, because injuries are our biggest limitation to progress, so we want to always try and minimize that. When I'm looking at general physical preparedness or work capacity, there are probably about 8 points I've kind of made that I'm looking to address through everything. And the way I kind of see this is that we want to raise our work capacity up to an acceptable standard, and then we want to maintain it from there and use that as the foundation to build our performance off of, okay? So we never want to let it drop off. It's about consistently drip feeding work in so that we can handle more and more work over a given week, over a given month, over a given year. So that is the overarching theme of general work capacity, and it's not really a workout you can do or a weight or a circuit that you just put here and there that's going to build work capacity. It's from the moment you start training to the moment you finish training. It's that, can we accumulate more high quality work that is going to build up our areas of weakness to make us, again, able to perform at a higher level and make us less likely to get hurt in the process. So the key points that I look to address when sort of building work capacity is, first and foremost, is having good body awareness and body control. We need to be able to move really well and move with really high quality, because you have to be able to do it in short instances first before you can worry about maintaining this quality over longer periods of time. So again, you'll see in my warm-ups, in some of my bodyweight circuits, in some of the way I perform movements, is that the execution of the movement and the understanding of it, the balance, the stability, is primary importance. Right? We need to make sure that we're constantly refining the way we move, constantly refining the sort of repertoire of movements that we can do, and having a really broad movement portfolio, essentially, right? We want to be really good at lots of different things. That's the general component, right? Because you can build specific work capacity. This would be your threshold works, your intervals, if you're a runner. But from a general perspective, everything that we do inside the gym should be there to support our specific work capacity as and when we choose things, right? Because we might be a football player, that will come with some specific work capacity that we need to build. You might be a runner, that will have a different one. So it's just understanding that the general work capacity in the gym is about building the foundations that basically act as a launch pad that we can go into any field from, okay? Because we're just in shape. That's essentially what high work capacity in GPP really stands for. So the first one is obviously having good body awareness and good body control, being a really good mover. Then we want to make sure that we've got optimal ranges of both flexibility and mobility. So just to define both of those, flexibility for me is passive range of motion, and then mobility is the ranges of motion that we can control. So again, you can have people that can passively move their limbs through ranges of motion, but they can't lift them there and hold them there and control them there. So we want a bit of both, right? We need to have the passive ranges, but we also need to make sure that we're working on controlling and developing the strength to be able to control those ranges of motion as well, right? The next one is going to be joint stability, right? We need to make sure that we are developing stable joints, the muscles, the rotator cuff for the shoulder, the sort of external rotators for the hip, really making sure that they are well built, well developed, have a good level of capacity so that they can maintain their job under high levels of fatigue. It's all too often that we get caught training the bigger muscles and not really working on joint stability because it's not sexy, so I understand why we don't do that. But this is something that we always want to make sure that is a thread weaving through our program so that we can consistently get better, and that we're not just leaving weak links untrained for them to break down further down the training process. The next one is going to be coordination. So this is of both movements, so in how we coordinate a hip hinge, how we coordinate a jump, how we coordinate running mechanics, sprinting, so how we coordinate movement, but also how we coordinate muscular contraction, right? Because we have inter and intramuscular contractions, and we want to make sure that the muscle can work be coordinated through the eccentric, isometric, concentric phases, but also that the muscles can work together. So there's a coordination between the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the calf, the hips, the glutes. You know, all of these muscles have to work as a team to produce movement. And we want to be training the body as a whole from the primary standpoint, and then working on the isolation or the weak areas as a secondary thing. So again, I do believe that when we're really well coordinated and we're moving well, there is less of a need to worry about isolation work, because everything's being trained as it's designed to be used. But again, when we have these areas of weakness or injuries that we had in the past, then we do need to put some isolation work on. But the reality is that we should be training the body from a whole first. The next one's going to be hypertrophy. So we want to make sure that we're laying the foundation of strength, right? And that comes with having optimal amounts of muscle mass. So this is not necessarily supramaximal amounts of muscle mass, not unless you're a bodybuilder. But if you're an athlete, we need to have good muscle hypertrophy in the muscles and the joints and the joint stabilizing muscles that are going to keep us healthy, right? Making sure that all the locomotion based muscles, our hips, our trunk, is very well built, very well developed, but also usable, right? So there's a difference between what I would define sort of show hypertrophy. So these are, again, potentially just some bodybuilders who just want the size. They're being judged on their size in their sport. And then functional hypertrophy. Functional hypertrophy changes from sport to sport and discipline to discipline, right? So if you're a swimmer, you need to have a large amount of hypertrophy in and around the shoulders, the lats, you know, and the pecs, so that you can propel yourself through the water. Likewise, if you're an athlete, you want to make sure you've got really hypertrophy sort of hips, core, trunk, like legs, so that we can be explosive, we have good stability upon ground contact, and that we are not going to be exposing ourselves to injury through change of direction and things like that. So again, hypertrophy will come through the practice of our actions and the sport we're doing, but also in the gym we need to make sure that we're looking after those muscles as well and giving them the sort of, I guess, the TLC that they need, so that they can perform optimally when we put them in their sort of sport or their field of play. Then we need to develop core stability, right? Core stability is, primary, right? So when I always sort of say that when you look at a skeleton, you know, from the bottom rib to the top of the pelvis, there is nothing, but that is the house of our spinal column. So we need to make sure that's protected, right? Because again, if we sever our spinal canal, then we're going to be paralyzed from the waist down. So we need to make sure we're looking after that. And core stability is vitally important. Now, core training for me is not crunches, not flexion-based movement. They can be a part of it, but primarily we need to make sure that we have a really strong and stable core. Not only in the gym, in things like carries and planks and things like that, but also in our running drills, right? Making sure that we're maintaining postures and positions so that we can perform optimally. So we need to make sure that there's a thread of that weaving through the program as well. And this is where I like carries. Again, you'll see even on my sort of running drills that I do, they're very core dominant, right? And you can challenge your trunk from a stability standpoint. Like I sort of said, far too often people, when they do their core training, it's all flexion and motion based movement, and we don't do enough to really train the core from a stability standpoint. And I think that for me, I think 80% of all my clients and my core training comes from stability purposes rather than flexion. I think flexion is a nice way of building up the rectus abdominis and giving yourself a nice looking six pack, but it doesn't go that far to develop the core stability that we need upon ground contact, jumping, exploding, things like that. Okay, especially if you want to bear load on your back and squat, deadlift and all those things, we need a really stable core. The last one is going to be stamina. We want to have all of those things beforehand, and then we want to be able to maintain them for longer and longer periods of time, because that is what, for me, work capacity is what GPP is. It's the ability to maintain positions, postures, mechanics under more and more fatigue, because fatigue changes everything. Okay, and again, I'm going to do a video on how I like to manage fatigue through my training, but fatigue changes everything. And the whole purpose of raising our work capacity is to, again, resist fatigue, so that fatigue doesn't change our mechanics, our positions, our postures. And again, like I sort of said, I think this should be a theme of the overall program. So again, if you've watched my building durability video, you'll see from the warm-up circuits that I kind of do, which are kind of very technique based, very high quality work, but like low in sort of external load. These are more body weight movements that are getting me ready for the session. There's an element of work capacity that comes from that. Then when I go in and perform my sort of strength work for the day, there's an element of work capacity built into this in terms of managing the rest periods and making sure that we're sort of always sort of developing our ability to perform work. And then when it comes into sort of what I'm showing you in the background here is some more sort of circuit-based stuff that I like to use from an accessory standpoint, where it's sub-maximal work performed at a really high quality of movement. So again, technically sound movement. So we're refining our body awareness, body control under load, and then performing that for extensive periods of time. So again, I like 30 seconds work, 15 seconds rest, but you can do 45 seconds work, 15 seconds rest, 60 seconds work, 30 seconds rest. You can play around with this. The goal here is that we're not running around like headless chickens. This is not CrossFit per se, where we're seeing all technique breakdown. This is technique, perfect movement, and we're just layering it on top of each other. There's no amount of work that you can do today that's going to build work capacity. Consistency trumps intensity in this world, okay? So it's understanding that it's the layering, the laying of bricks consistently that builds the foundations of where we're heading. We don't need to kill ourselves in every session, we just need to stack bricks. A mistake that people make that I see is that they perform too much work in a session, make it too hard for them to recover. They're sore for days, and then they can't sort of replicate that workload and the day after that. So what I like to do is just, again, this is a training program. This is a 6-7 day a week program, and I'm constantly just laying that brick every single time. It's consistency trumps intensity. Again, making sure that the quality of work is as high as we can, and that we're getting ourselves prepared physically in a variety of different things. So add some variation into these circuits, get good at many different push-ups, body weight stuff, lightly loaded movements, jumping exercises, some conditioning stuff. Again, we're trying to challenge the system to make it difficult to maintain these positions and postures. And again, where your current starting point is dictates how hard you need to push. And the goal over time is to gradually expose ourselves to more and more workload, i.e. raising our work capacity. So hopefully you found this useful. Took a little bit of a deep dive into my thoughts on work capacity and why I feel it's important that we all become fitter, faster, stronger. But in order to do that, we need to have the foundations that allow us to cope with the training that's going to get us there. So again, if this spurs any questions for you, or if you've got any video requests that you'd like me to do, take a deep dive in, please feel free to drop them in the comment section below. But until next time, guys, have a great day.